described the rescue operation as a race against time. But after more than 30 hours of search, no survivors or bodies have been found. The 80-feet-high avalanche which hit a battalion headquarters on Saturday morning is being described as a mix of snow, stones and mud. The army has released names of the missing. They include from officers to waiters and barbers. The Pakistani military chief General Pervez Kayani is also in the area and monitoring rescue efforts.
There's been a large explosion in the northern Nigerian city of Kaduna. Details are sketchy, but the Nigerian military told the BBC there had been a number of casualties. Reports say that the blast occurred near a church. The main airport in Yemen has reopened a day after it was attacked by troops angered by the dismissal of their commander, who was close to the former president, Ali Abdullah Saleh. Officials said that they had received assurances that there would be no threat to aviation at the airport. International aid to developing countries has fallen for the first time in 14 years as wealthy nations adopt austerity measures following the global recession. The Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development said that aid fell by 2.7% last year. It's at a time when poorer countries hit by the slowdown in the world economy needed it most. BBC World News.
You're listening to the World Briefing from the BBC with Tom Esselmont. We start with Syria, where after one of the bloodiest days in the conflict, with reports of up to 160 people dead on Saturday, Damascus now says it will not abide by a UN-brokered agreement for a ceasefire. The Syrian government had agreed to the deal after months of intense but fruitless diplomacy. But, as we've been hearing, today's statement from the Syrian Foreign Ministry suggests that the ceasefire, which was due to start on Tuesday, is now off. Our correspondent Jim Muir, who's based in Beirut, gave me the details of this latest statement from Damascus.
It's basically casting doubt on the entire program that had been laid out by the Kofi Annan peace plan. It's saying that what it was expecting from Kofi Annan was for him to provide written guarantees that the opposition fighters would not only cease fire but also be ready to hand over their weapons and allow the state to spread its authority everywhere. But they're also looking for guarantees from other governments such as Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Turkey to stop, as the Foreign Ministry put it, financing and arming these terrorist groups. So basically the government seemed to be expecting not some kind of balanced ceasefire but a complete surrender by the opposition side in preparation for peace talks, which presumably the government would expect to dominate, since it would have asserted its position so unchallengeably on the ground. Now, whether this is news to Kofi Annan, we just don't know, but he did not appear to be seeking written guarantees from all the opposition groups and from Saudi Arabia, Qatar and others. He seemed to be looking at a process whereby the government would take the first step by pulling out of towns and cities. That would put a huge burden of pressure on the opposition to follow suit and call off their armed attacks, and then you could have some kind of balanced negotiation. Well, all that now has been thrown into doubt.
So basically, Jim, sounds from what you're saying that it's hard to say what the impact will be on Kofi Annan's peace plan.
Well, since the government is now saying quite clearly it's not going to pull out of the towns and cities on Tuesday, the whole timeline collapses. And don't forget that has been endorsed, the timeline, by the UN Security Council in a statement last week. So on Tuesday, obviously, we're just a couple of days away now, there will be no Syrian state withdrawal of troops and tanks from the towns and cities, as far as we can tell at the moment, unless Kofi Annan comes up with all these magic written promises, and therefore there will be no ceasefire by next Thursday, a global ceasefire involving the opposition groups as well, and therefore there will be no deployment of UN observers at this particular time. Now, it could be this is just a delay, or it could be a mortal blow.
Jim Muir in Beirut. The Afghan government and the US have reached a deal over controversial night raids carried out by American forces. A spokesman for the Afghan administration said that the country's defense minister and the commander of the US forces would sign a memorandum of understanding later today to bring the raids under Afghan leadership. What that will mean on the ground is unclear because details of the proposed deal haven't been released by either side. But this is what Janan Mosazai, the spokesman of the Afghan Foreign Ministry, had to say.
All special operations, including night operations, should be and can only be conducted by Afghans. If they require support, then we hope that that support will be provided to Afghan Special Operations Forces conducting such operations.
Well, our correspondent Bilal Sawari joins me now on the line from Kabul. And Bilal, the spokesman of the Afghan Foreign Ministry, being pretty clear there about who should be in charge of these raids. But what more can you tell us about the deal?
Well, what we understand from Afghan officials that Afghans would be in the lead, that they would be in charge of detention, custody, that Afghan judges would decide after a night raid is conducted whether the detainees should be kept or they should be freed. But the reality is that the Afghans would require significant support from U.S. and other NATO special forces, whether that's intelligence, whether that's troop transportations, or that is providing them logistical support, especially in the country's provinces and districts and valleys where a lot of these nighttime operations have been taking place.
So it's not for sure, it's not clear that Afghan forces would have sole responsibility for these raids.
Well, the Afghan officials have been telling us that. That's what they want this to be, but we still have to wait for the final details. What we do know from senior Afghan officials, including those close to President Karzai, that the Afghans would have the veto power. If the Afghans decided that a night operation was not necessary in a location, the NATO and U.S. Special Forces would simply not be able to carry that out. I was speaking to a presidential aide, and he said even if NATO and U.S. Special Forces had to interrogate a detainee, they would have to send a written statement to the Afghans before doing so.
And has there been actually any comment from United States sources?
Well, American officials have been telling the BBC that they will only comment once this agreement has been signed. So we have not heard from them so far.
OK, Bilal Sawari in Kabul, thank you very much. Now, cricket diplomacy has been attempted before. Indian and Pakistani leaders have been known to meet on the sidelines when their teams have played each other. This time, the Pakistani President, Asif Ali Zardari, is in Delhi to meet the Indian Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh. They met over lunch, which reportedly included kebabs and curries from all over India. But Mr. Zardari's visit comes just days after India again accused Pakistan of sheltering the man it says planned the Mumbai attacks 4 years ago. With feelings still raw, can there be any prospect of diplomatic progress? After the meeting, the Indian Prime Minister sounded cautiously optimistic.
The relations between India and Pakistan should become normal. That's our common desire. We have a number of issues and we are willing to find practical, pragmatic solutions to all those issues, and that's the message that President Zardari and I would wish to convey.
Our correspondent in Delhi, Sanjoy Majumdar, put this latest round of direct talks between the Indian Prime Minister and the Pakistani President in perspective.
President Zardari left the Indian Prime Minister's house about 40 minutes ago, headed about 350 kilometers southwest of the capital to the city of Ajmer, where he's due to visit a famous Muslim shrine and offer prayers. That's really the reason he's here. But because Indian and Pakistani leaders meet so rarely, even this occasion was enough to raise some hopes that the two sides will be able to make some progress on what has become a really difficult relationship over the years, particularly since the 2008 Mumbai attacks. So the President came here with his son Bilawal. He met the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh for about half an hour, and they had lunch. They were joined by delegates from both sides. They didn't really give us a whole lot of details on what they spoke about, but there's some hope that the Prime Minister might just visit Pakistan towards the end of the year.
And you mentioned the Mumbai attacks, of course, one area of great tension between the two of them, between the two sides. Did the Mumbai